Beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lamidi. In today's video, we are going to talk about the investigation of a high potassium result. So before getting into that, we need to talk about what is this potassium. So potassium, it is a major intracellular cation. It's a cation because it is positively charged. Because it is positively charged, so that's why it's a cation, and we find it mostly inside the cells, and it has a reference plasma or serum range of about 3.5 to 5.1 millimoles per liter, but the reference ranges might be different from a lab to lab. So it is important that in the laboratory, when the doctor is sent in a specimen and potassium is requested, that when you get a value that is above 5.1, you investigate to make sure that whatever that value is, it is a true value of the potassium concentration that is inside the patient body. So it must be representative, because if not, potassium, it is associated with cardiac arrhythmias and cardiac arrest and so on. So when the patient has a high potassium results, like, it alarms the doctor that they have to do something immediately to try to lower that potassium result, like maybe giving the patient insulin or sodium bicarbonate, which is going to force the potassium that is in your serum or plasma back into the cells where it belongs, so that it can be lower in your extracellular fluid, and then the patient so that the patient does not have those heart problems. So it's important for us as med techs to make sure that when we report a high potassium, it is a true potassium because of all of that. So there is a few things that you would need to check as soon as you get a high result. But either way, you still have to follow your laboratory's standard operation procedures on from which value and how to go about it. But in a nutshell, there's a few things that are common that you will have to look for. Of which, number one, you have to make sure that your instrument that you are using to measure the analyte is working functionally. So how are you going to check that your instrument is working okay? It's by checking your IQC or your QC results, if are they performing properly. So your QC results must be performing. So number one, you can check your QCs, and then if your QC results are proving that your machine is working properly, there's nothing wrong, then now you need to move over to things or interferences that might cause a high potassium result or a false high potassium result. So you have to go through them by eliminating them, and as soon as you have eliminated them, then you can have a true sense of feeling that definitely whatever potassium result that you're sending out, it is a true value of what is happening in the patient. So after the QC, then you know that you've ran your QCs, your machine is functioning properly, but you're getting this high potassium result. What you will check for, usually that people, what is a go-to for most people, will be hemolysis. So I have just said already that potassium, it is a major intracellular cation. So it means we find it in its higher concentrations inside the cell. So hemolysis or lysis, which is the breakdown of your cells, your red blood cells in particular in this case. So it means during the breakdown of the red blood cells, which can be caused by various pre-analytical problems or issues that can result to a hemolysis. So if the cell breaks, it means it's going to release potassium into the extracellular fluid. And then when we measure it, we are going to get a high result. But that result won't necessarily mean the result is high in the patient. It is just high in that tube because whatever blood that we've taken from the patient is hemolyzed, and the red cells that are in there have been moved. The potassium that is in there has been moved from intracellular to your extracellular fluid, of which when we are measuring the extracellular fluid, which is your serum or plasma. Then another thing to look at is to check, is your specimen a fresh specimen or is it an old specimen? So in this case, you will check your collection time, your collection date, your receiving time, and your receiving date to check that the period is it not greater than 12 hours. Because if the period is greater than 12 hours, remember, this blood has been taken out of the patient as it is. So if it stays longer, it means the glucose glycolysis takes place. So the glucose that is in that SST tube or that plain tube will get depleted due to the glycolysis that's going to take place in the tube. And if it gets depleted, then you end up having your sodium potassium gradient pump not being intact. And if it's not being intact, then your potassium tends to leak from the cell into the extracellular fluid. Then when you measure your serum, you find that you get a high result. So that's why you need to rule out that is this specimen old or not. So when I rule out, okay, my specimen is not hemolyzed, my specimen is not old. So what you can look for as well is the EDTA contamination. And the reason for that is that the EDTA tube, it contains 2 times like higher concentrations of potassium inside of them as part of their preservative. So if it happens that the phlebotomists, they don't follow the correct order of draw, or they just pour over blood, probably a patient had a difficult bleed and they didn't want to re-bleed, they just pour over from the EDTA into your SST tube, that can lead to that potassium that is inside the EDTA tube to be carried over to the SST, and then when we measure with our instruments, you get a high result. So with EDTA contamination, you have to, if calcium is not requested, run calcium. Then if you see that your calcium is very, very, very low, most of the time when it's less than 0.5, when it's less than 0.5 millimoles per liter, so that it's a clear indication that your sample is contaminated with the EDTA, because an EDTA is a divalent cation binder, so it will bind to this calcium permanently. So that's why when we measure it, we don't get it. So now, after you have ruled out hemolysis, old specimen, your QCs are okay, there's no EDTA contamination, then what you can look for is to check urea and creatinine results. So when you checking urea and creatinine results, basically you want to rule out kidney problems from the patient, if the patient has any renal disease or not. Because if your urea and creatinine is high, it is indicative that probably the patient has kidney disease, which your high potassium result will be consistent with the disease. Because when with patients that have a renal disease, their kidneys are not working properly, so they don't excrete extra potassium as they should because of the disease. So that can be consistent. And as well, you can check previous results. So you can check previous results, but by previous results, I don't mean results that were done last year in 2019 so you're going to check the most recent previous result. If the UNE was requested previously, let's say in the morning or yesterday and so on, to check the potassium result of this patient, to see if is this a patient with a known high potassium result. Probably the doctor know already the condition or the medication that the patient is taking that might be leading to a potassium to be high. So you will look at that as well, but you have to rule out all those other things that can cause a false high result before you can have that confidence that, okay, it means it was high in the morning, even now it's still high, and the sample is not contaminated, there's no hemolysis, it's a fresh sample, it's not old, my instrument is functioning the way it's supposed to be, it reproduces results accordingly. So this might be that because this patient is a known patient. But above all, you need to follow your lab's protocol, because some labs, especially with regards to hemolysis, for example, they can have a grading that when do you start to panic, whether is it 1+, 2+, or 3+. So you will just have to follow that, and the comments that you need to put in, if there's any commenting that you need to do. So some labs, they do put in a comment, especially if the sample is not grossly hemolyzed, for example. They will tell the doctor that treat this result with reserve because the sample was hemolyzed. Whereas with some, they don't even report that result at all. Then you have to get a rebleed, a fresh sample for running it. So with an old specimen, usually it's a no-go area. If it's old, there has to be a rebuild. But follow your own lab's protocol. That should be able to assist you with sending out results confidently, knowing that there won't be any comeback to you. So basically, that's it from me. This is what I needed to share in this video. Hopefully, it has helped some of you. If you have any questions, please type them down below in the comment section. Then I will answer you as soon as I get time and I'm available. I'll make time to answer them. And above that, thank you so much.